Mark, welcome to Mint, my friend. How are you doing? Thank you for being on.
I'm good, man. What's up? Thank you for having me here.
What an exciting time to be alive, huh?
Right? Every
That's what I'm
day.
saying.
Every day. I haven't been this happy every day in a long time.
Let's go. What's driving majority of your happiness right now?
I think I'm obviously a Web3 junkie, but
Okay.
it's that whole thing where things are changing every day and evolving and getting improved upon and ideated on, and the emergence is everywhere. So it's like you never know what's going to happen each day. And the last time I had that feeling was when I first went to the UK, to London, and I was doing studio sessions with different people every day. And I'd wake up in the morning thinking, by the time I go to bed, there'll be some new music which never existed before today.
Yeah,
And that's what Web3 is doing. Like,
that's what Web3 is doing. So speaking of Web3, okay. I always like to start with intros before we jump into like what's
yeah,
actually happening. So who are you, Mark? Okay, what does the world need to know about you? And more specifically, how did you get your start in crypto, in Web3, the whole shebang?
totally, man. So I'm a musician, I'm a composer, producer, a DJ, remix, kind of do everything there is. I grew up in New Zealand and partly between Japan and New Zealand, but mostly in New Zealand, and learned piano from like age 4. Like my dad forced me on the instrument, so there was no choice. I grew up playing classical music and then started messing around with like Beatles songbooks and stuff like that. Fell in love with jazz through my dad's record collection, primarily, actually. And I just loved the idea of improvisation. You know, growing up playing classical, it was like, yo, let's free this up. And then my life became this kind of weird pendulum swing between wanting to be like a straight ahead acoustic jazz piano player in the mold of history, and then falling in love with boom bap hip hop and like club music and jungle and drum and bass and house music, and kind of going back and forth between these two things. Like I did some college in Boston at Berkeley. I spent a lot of time in Japan with family there as I was kind of getting into the music scene in Tokyo. And things led me to London. Like I got a fellowship in New Zealand, which allowed me to travel the world for a year chasing music. So
Wow.
I focused that around the UK because the girl I was seeing then had moved to the UK. But it was like, I was in Cuba, San Fran, New York, London, Paris, Tokyo, Sydney, just for a year. It was nuts. But that was an epiphany time, and pre YouTube, so you had to go to places for real. Um, and that kind of led me into this world of this hybridity of jazz and club music, which is really where I evolved mostly in the UK, in London. I spent 10 years there, firstly as a session keyboard player, and then as a producer and remixer and live performer. And I kind of, I was one of the first people to do things like, you have ostensibly what's a jazz group, and then you bring an MPC, like you bring a drum machine into the band, and like programming live and sampling live with the
Mm.
band. That kind of hybridity, which isn't that unusual now, it was totally unthought of then. So
When was this? Give me a date. Like what year was this?
so this is like going into like 98 was when it really peaked for me, as
Okay.
far as hearing music that was the culmination of everything I'd grown up loving, and it was redigested and assimilated and re-expressed in a whole way I'd never imagined possible.
Mm.
Like that was wild for me. Like seeing guys on this guy IG Culture, producer in London, seeing him on a SP 1200 drum machine just banging out beats, and it sounded like a Harvey Mason drum solo. Like it I didn't understand, but I was like, yes, I understand. I found my people. So that kind of brought me to this point in music of like, okay, I can bring the jazz, what I love about jazz, improvisation, organicness, evolution, and I can intersect it with what I love about electronic music. The textures, the sonics, the whole culture of loops, dance floors, and that became my thing. I
Mm.
spent I spent 20 years recording, releasing, touring. I was on the road literally half the year, every year for 20 years until COVID hit.
Wow.
Um, and so that was through, I was with a major label to start with Universal. I went through all iterations of independent deals and then self releases and everything, agents, managers. self-agenting, self-managing. Like I did it all. And so for 20 years, have been able to travel the world, play literally everywhere, and develop this kind of, I guess, a cult audience everywhere. And it's a niche, but it's like a prevalent niche everywhere I've gone, which is beautiful. So then COVID hits, obviously touring gone, calendar empty. um, every musician on earth had the same reaction. It's like, well, what are we going to do, right? So I had dabbled in crypto, I would say 2017, like that moment right before it crashed, when if you were the last to hear about it, it's like, oh, let me go in now. This is like making money. Like I'm gonna make bank now, right? And then obviously the whole thing crashed, and I didn't have kind of like a information community around me, or a mentorship community where I understood anything about what crypto really was. Like I understood the premise kind of, but that was it. So
Hmm.
it was funny. Recently, I was looking back at my Coinbase transaction history, and I was like, wait, I sold Bitcoin in 2017? Like what what?
What was I thinking?
um, but then, yeah, so pandemic hits, and that was really the turning point. Like, the way Clubhouse took off and the conversations
Yeah.
just happened, right? Um, and then my real kind of coming into the space, which is my Genesis collection, a project called Motherland. So summer 2019, I was on a artist residency in Japan, and one of the other artists on that residency who I met and became friends with then was Sersu. And so Amir, like, I didn't know anything about his kind of involvement with crypto, but I met him as a visual artist and on this artist residency.
Mm.
So I shot all the footage which became the Motherland film. I shot it during that residency.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
and then, COVID hits, and I'm like, well, I never knew what I was going to do with the footage, but it eventually became evident I wanted to explore it through an ancestral homage music art piece, and I put this all together.
Hmm.
And then I was like, well, this is too much. I can't just put this on YouTube and Spotify. It doesn't make sense. This is like a narrative kind of. It's an art piece.
Yeah.
And so I was speaking to Amir de Sersu, and he's like, man, you got to mint this. This is and the reason you have to mint this is because it's cultural narrative. And so what was interesting to me now, looking back over the last year, is being mentored into the space by someone who really instilled the idea in me of the importance of putting culture on chain.
Hmm.
So the achievement wasn't like, I mean, the goal wasn't like, okay, I need to bag 15 ETH from this project. And it's like, obviously, whatever money comes in, fantastic. But the whole principle and the success was to put the project on chain. So it's a contribution to culture on chain. And so that kind of became my founding kind of premise for how I look at Web3. And I think the way you're brought in is really important, right?
Yeah.
So that gave me my perspective. And then over the last year, it's been everything. Joining the FWB community and love that, meeting a lot of people through there.
Yeah.
Starting up a mentorship program, doing my NFTs, like joining a crew and building a new Web3 music platform, which will hopefully happen this year. And just like
Nice.
it's gone full 180.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So
Yeah,
you've really lived very much a traditional life of a artist, of a musician.
yeah,
Um, and now you're coming into Web3, or you've been in Web3 exploring the new fronts of where music intersects with crypto, and exploring this level of independency, essentially, that you're after. But why is Web3 the perfect medium for music? Beyond bringing culture on chain, right? Because that's
sure.
also in NFTs in general, with art, with fashion.
Sure. I mean, the perfect medium for music is live, right?
Mhm.
Like to be literal. But I think for the exploitation of music and for the financialization of it and the sense and community building, like for all those aspects, Web3 provides solutions. Primarily through decentralization. Like the idea that like my MySpace account, I would love to have that back. Are you kidding me? Like with all the content,
Really?
comments, friends, like just to see it, like all that data's gone forever. Like it's gone, right? So that perspective, I think, is really important, of being able to, have immutability and, perpetual content. I think that's really important. And then access to our people, like the way if I post on Instagram, like, what is it, 2% or 5% of people who chose to follow my account will see what I want to share with them. I mean, all that kind of thing. It's, nothing sustainable. And I think it's more, for me, more than the solutions Web3 provides. It's about how problematic the music industry has been up to this point in time. That the entire music industry, I believe, is predicated on the idea of exploiting the creative in favor of the exploiter. That is the music industry.
Mhm.
Music is a different conversation. Music as art and music as human culture, that's different. But the industry, it's not there for music to be great. Like, that's not what it's made for.
Mhm.
So the idea that there's a potential solution to that excites me to no end. Like, that's it for me. And so now we have all these toolings to explore the idea of a potential solution without the middleman, without, it's the first time in history when musicians have not been behind the ball with tech and industry. And I say that to say that, whether it's any technological development in music history, but let's go with the most recent ones, like MP3, like digital download culture, and then streaming. We weren't, like, those things happened, and then we had to comply. That's how it worked. And then the same way with the industry, the way all the industry framework is put together, it's intentionally made in a convoluted way, so it's difficult to find all your money that belongs to your asset called music, and it's very convoluted, and that's by design. It's like, it's difficult for a musician to understand that all by design. So to take those two aspects and have a tooling which can just get rid of both of them, I'm like, yeah, this is, at the worst, this is great.
Yeah. Can you talk more about, so you just went on a little bit of an example tangent of comparing traditional music to crypto music, okay? Can you talk more about, like, what are the biggest, like, insights that you've developed as a traditional artist coming into Web3 that maybe others won't necessarily have the purview of seeing, right? So you talked about payments, right? You talked about all these dashboards. You talked about social media data, and right, and like everything living on one centralized server versus being repurposed on other platforms. What other, like, interesting insights that might not be as common to the more modern day independent artists that you're kind of seeing being a better format in Web3 for them?
Totally, man. I think one thing that comes to mind straight away is how labels work in the traditional system. And that is, there's two kinds of labels fundamentally. There's one that's a catalog label,
Hmm.
and there's one that's a new music label. Some of them are big enough to be both. But, as far as people who are new to, like, new artists and emerging artists and aspiring artists, we're talking about new music labels primarily. So their whole business model is based on, you have some new music, it has a buzz, they capitalize on the buzz, and then they make some money. But the buzz is, by definition, it always happens when the new release cycle's happening. If you're one of these huge artists who just kind of can plateau at a really high level consistently, I mean, that's an anomaly. Cool. But for the average artist, in any genre, you're going to peak when a new release comes out, and then it's going to kind of plateau down. And so the label has never had any kind of financial incentive or tooling to keep your exploitation consistent. In other words, to keep your money growing and to keep you in the marketplace if you're not in the new release cycle. So the best thing they can do is come back to you as an artist and say, yo, give us a new album, and then we can push you, and that'll push your old album.
Right.
And then, and we're in this cycle, right? It's never ending. So I think that's one fundamental thing where, like, I mean, someone we all talk about a lot, Latasha, who's just doing incredible things in the space. The way she'll give you, like, a new joint, a recent joint, an old joint, and it's like this. It's all art, it's all music, and it's all valid. And just because, like, for me with my catalog, just because a track was recorded in 2005 doesn't reduce the value of the track.
Right.
but in the traditional system, it does. Like until some show decides to
Oh,
sync it, then it comes to life again. Otherwise,
let's
yeah.
talk about that again really quick. Why is an old track new in crypto? Why is that okay versus not okay? That's a really interesting insight because I have realized that a lot of artists that jump into Web3 and music, they end up publishing and minting tracks that already were in existence, that already have streams. Like
Mhm.
Blau is the best example of that, right?
Totally,
All the
totally.
songs that he
Hmm.
basically sold that iconic drop that made headlines, those were all repurposed tracks, right? That
Hmm.
were brought
Hmm.
that we were re-brought to life, excuse me. Why is that acceptable here?
Or, I mean, why shouldn't it be, right? Like,
Also true,
it's
like why should it not be? Yeah.
yeah. At the end of the day, it's like if we looked at visual art through the same lens, then you could look at an artist who, I mean, every artist I think of right now is not even alive, but you could say, well, you know, their old work, I mean, it's old. Like that's not worth any money. Like I want the new joint. Like Picasso. I want that new Picasso. I don't want the old Picasso.
Yeah.
Like this is, to me, this is art, and I think there's a distinction here to make as well um, between music in its genres and functionality is a huge spectrum, and I skew to art music. I skew to music as art before I skew to music as product. And that's not to disparage anything because I don't know. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Um,
and really quick, so I just want to clarify something. Like,
yeah.
not all old music doesn't do well if it's repurposed, right? Like,
Oh,
you can still hear
yeah.
Michael Jackson songs like being played, right? And it's
Totally.
old stuff. Like his catalog has
Totally.
value. Like your
Oh my
YouTube
God.
catalog has value. It still accumulates views depending on
There
who
we
you
go.
are,
Yeah.
right? But I see what you're saying. Like with more everyday songs, those don't get necessarily repurposed on mainstream radio or on Spotify playlists because they're already in the past, right? Whereas here
Exactly.
on this medium, you're actually reintroducing them in a new format and a new way to capture true value depending on what the market wants to value it as.
100%, man.
Okay.
The way that back catalog is part of an artist's story, and
Yeah.
that we now have a tooling to be able to share our story and frame it in our own way, that's totally unique. Beyond that, it's like you click on discography on Spotify and it's some JPEGs.
Yeah.
But for me to be actually contextualize that for people is amazing.
Yeah.
At that point, it's not about, and I alluded to this before, it's not even about it being collected or bought. It's about it being on chain. And when it gets to the point when it meets its collector, the person who this, yeah, I resonate with this, then that becomes a transaction. Cool. But it's much more important to me that the story is there.
Hmm.
And I think we have a thing happening in the space already where people feel like, oh, if my NFT didn't sell on the day I dropped it, it's a failure. I'm going to burn it or whatever it might be. And that happens, right? But it's like if you're putting this into a space forever,
Yeah.
then maybe it's going to meet its collector in 5 years' time, and that doesn't pay the rent this month. But there's so much value in that to me.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So speaking of catalogs, speaking about buyback, speaking about all these things, it's a perfect segue into where we are currently with you specifically, Mark, as a creator. You have two main things that you're kind of working on right now in Web3 is buying back your catalog and owning your work and your art, and also building some form of creator club around you, around your music, around your niche, and the collectors that decide to support you and be a part of your journey. So the first thing I want to talk about, okay, is this buyback crowdfund. Um, First of all, congratulations because you're already more than halfway at your funding goal. And I'll share my screen in a second for everybody that's watching on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, go check out the YouTube because it's really, really interesting what you're doing. Okay. Can you give us all some context? What it is that you're trying to buy back? Why are you using crypto as the medium to do it? And where are you going to take it once you have it?
For sure, man. I mean, this is uh, the fact that I was able to deploy this crowdfund alone to me is really huge. The conversation it's kind of given rise to with a lot of artists is entertaining at the very least, and kind of paradigm shifting at most. So what I'm trying to do is, raise funds through the Mirror Crowd Fund in order to reacquire 7 of my back catalog albums from the labels who control them. And the idea is that, there's about 15 or 16 albums. I say about because I'm producing other artists, but if I look at my catalog, it's around that number. So it's around half the catalog. And the idea is, in reacquiring that, my whole back catalog becomes the foundational asset for a DAO, for the Mashy Beats DAO. And that, Mashy Beats was my record label at first, and now it's kind of become a Discord community, a collector creator kind of convergence. And I realized, okay, well, now the label can kind of be revived, but not as a label. Like there's something to build on here. So the idea of buyback, firstly, getting my own catalog back as an artist personally is so important to me, because I do believe we should own our stuff. And it's also important to me because these 7 albums are, kind of gathering dust with the labels who have them. Because as we talked about earlier, most labels don't have the tooling or vision, or they're too risk averse to support old catalog. They want the new album. So these albums, they tick over, on their DSPs, on their Spotifys, and on Bandcamp and vinyl and whatever. It ticks over, but there's no care given to it. There's no growth potential. And so I'm like, let me bring this back under one umbrella. Because I care about it. I want it to grow, and I can see what this can grow into. Also, at this point in my career, like, that's 20 years of albums. And so it's like that's a life's work for a lot of artists. I have a lot more to come ahead of me, but it's almost like a nice way to look at a chapter and be like, let me just kind of silo off this first 20 years and use it to build the next 20 years. So the idea with the Mirror crowdfund campaign is that, everyone gets tokens for their contributions relative to their amounts. I think it's like 1,000 tokens to 1 ETH. So the tokens are the buyback token. And then the buyback token becomes the top level governance token for Mashy Beats DAO. So essentially, those crowdfund contributors become the committee with which we're going to move forward with the DAO. And that's going to be, it's kind of what we expect of a DAO at this point, as far as proposals and snapshot voting, people having a say. I think there's an interesting conversation there around creator DAOs, where people feel like there's a risk of, I don't want to open up my creative process to voting. And that's not what I'm doing at all. That will never be the case. As a creator, I'm autonomous, and I've spent over 20 years not one time compromising stylistically, so I'm not about to start now. But then when it comes to, how do we build the treasury? What's the strategy for this? Maybe there's these 5 sick projects, but I can only do one right now. Which one do we think is the most beneficial for the community and the DAO? And then, okay, the treasury's got a surplus now. What are we going to do with this? Let's bring in some more artists. And, so basically having a community co-op label is the idea. And I liken it to, if I took some of my favorite labels, like say a Blue Note Records and a Def Jam Records and a Brainfeeder Records, and it was right at the beginning of their stories, but they were all one label, and I could have a seat at that table in the evolution and development of it. To me, that's a really interesting proposition, which I would have loved to do that. So that's what I'm trying to create.
Got it. What's up, guys? Adam Levy here. Sorry for the quick pause. I wanted to give some love to our 2 NFT sponsors that are making this episode a reality. They are Coinvise and Polygon Studios. On Coinvise, you can create a personal or community-owned social token on Ethereum or Polygon. Coinvise also helps you create incentives through token rewards and bounties, NFT business models, and bot integrations for Discord. Discover more today by visiting coinvise.co. Polygon Studios is the gaming and NFT arm of Polygon, who's focused on growing the blockchain gaming and NFT industry while bridging the gap between Web 2 and Web 3 gaming. The Polygon Studios ecosystem comprises highly loved blockchain games like OpenSea, Upshot, Avagachi, Zedrun, Skyweaver, Decentraland, and Decentral Games. If you're a gamer, builder, or NFT creator looking to join the Polygon Studios ecosystem, get started today by visiting polygonstudios.com. All right, back to the episode. So there's a couple things here, okay? And let me actually share my screen for a minute, okay? Give me a second. I want to pull up the value and actually what it is specifically that people are buying back, okay? So we know it's the catalog, but this is basically like an overview. So to date, you've raised 8.68 ETH. Your funding goal is 12 ETH. And you have about what? 39 backers to date so far, each collectively getting their own perks and their own NFTs. Talk to me more about like what happens afterwards. Now that you collected your work, okay, you're probably earning royalties on this work as well, right? You're probably making money off this work that's being it's being conducted through some type of rev share with these labels. And apologize if I missed this, but are you going to be sharing some of the royalties with like DAO contributors as well, or what does that look like?
For sure. No, I'm not. I think the royalty fractionalization conversation, I know it's very polarizing, and I'm on the side of not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was interesting actually speaking with I don't know if you know Decent
Mm-hmm.
XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking with them recently, I was like, oh, that's an interesting take on it. So there's room to move. But to get
Mm-hmm.
back to the buyback, so there's no master or IP share implied in the buyback tokens. The idea is that future revenue helps fund the treasury, and then the community who have the token holding community have the governance over the treasury. If at some point, say there's like 30 ETH in there, and the proposal is, do we want to, prorate pay this out to the token holders?
Mm-hmm.
That can happen. Like anything can happen. But also the whole, SEC securities issue. That this is the only
Yeah.
way I could do that, basically, without
Yeah.
going a whole other route. So
And by the way, I only asked that question from a very like dumbed down point of view because it is illegal to do that.
Well,
Like,
exactly, and
yeah,
because people are offering, like Royal went through, they have a whole legal framework to make that even a possibility. Like,
yeah,
it's not, you can't just, as an independent artist, you can't just offer up your royalties connected to a token. Like, yeah.
yeah. Makes
Um,
sense. Makes sense.
so thanks for the question.
No, yeah, no. And I say this again because part of these conversations are aimed to be educational. Now, I've had people on the
Mhm,
podcast before that they're like, just fuck that. Like, I'm just gonna do what I think I need to do. I want to share revenue with my collectors. Everybody has their
mhm,
own point of view, their own direction. Everybody's building in public. So while
mhm.
it is still very much a gray area, none of this is meant and intended to be like financial or legal advice, right? More
Totally.
so documenting the pulse and seeing what's happening and how people are kind of like responding and reacting and building in public. So just to make that clear, so I don't get attacked later on. Okay, so you buy your catalog, you own it. You talked about future revenue coming back to the DAO. What type
Mhm,
of revenue streams do you imagine coming back to the DAO? I'm going to list a
totally.
few, like
Yeah.
concerts, merchandise. What are we talking about? What kind of revenue?
I mean, I see it as being the further Web3 exploitation of the catalog. So primarily that means NFTs in whatever shape or form that could be. That goes back to the treasury, and then a percentage of what we could call terrestrial revenue. So DSPs, sync licenses, anything of that kind of sort. Yeah, so a portion of everything goes back. As far as anything else, like when it comes to concerts, tours, merch, I mean, I'd be happy, and it would be quite fun with tours to break down the budget for all the buyback holders, because that's there's nothing in touring. Like, there's nothing in it. There's When I say nothing, I don't mean there's nothing, but proportionately for the hours you put in, for the 15-hour flight each way, for that 40 minutes on stage. I mean, touring's not it's not the moneymaker that we're told it is, and that kind of ties back to my whole perspective as a traditional industry artist coming into Web3, is that the traditional industry has literally traumatized artists into thinking what's acceptable.
Sure.
It's like, whether touring is your primary revenue, this is how much Spotify pays, and so just being able to shake all that off and try and recontextualize it is dope. So
Yeah.
I'm diverging from what you're saying though.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Okay, so NFT revenue, merch revenue, if in any, touring revenue, and now that all this revenue is in the DAO, okay,
What
what happens
happens?
next? Yeah,
Totally. So, I mean, I personally have, I'm sure like you do too, like a laundry list of projects I want to do in the
yeah,
space. And so that's one thing, is putting those all to proposal and just seeing what is really beneficial and doable, and how to prioritize those. How to take the back catalog, and I want to get Web3 artists remixing it too, like have remix drops which are recontextualizing the back catalog
mm,
in collaboration with artists who are in the space.
mhm,
And also maybe the same kind of approach to bring like producers who I'm tight with, who are not in the space, help bring them in. Like, man, let's remix some of my old work,
yeah,
and we'll NFT this and like get you in the space. So using the back catalog in that way, and then beyond that, I'm really excited to bring on artists, like
mm,
to basically get to a point where we can say, okay, now there's some money in the treasury. Wouldn't it be crazy if these two collaborated and that's never happened? Let's make it happen.
mhm,
And having a chance to be really creative with it, and knowing that, based on the foundation of what I represent through my artistry and Mashy Beats as a community, knowing that, okay, I can get like some one of my favorite jazz drummers, like an Eric Harland or Nate Smith or someone, and then I can team them up with this person from this whole other world,
mhm.
and they'll probably be down because we're tight, and so to have
So
a
sick.
freedom to create things which wouldn't be possible.
Yeah,
That's wild to me.
yeah.
Wild.
So what's the legality of actually buying back your catalog? And who are you buying it back from? Who owns it right now?
Right. So there's two labels, and
Okay.
one of them made me sign an NDA before we could even start talking about this. Like I told them what I wanted to do, and they're like, "Yeah, NDA, then we can talk." That's wild in itself as an idea. Um, and so they're both independent labels with pretty large artist catalogs.
Are they well
Um,
known? Are they, like, relatively well known in the artist community?
in my world, absolutely
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
Um, and they're very active. They have a lot of artists and a lot of releases, and so this whole issue of like a new release becoming obsolete in proactiveness, that's kind of common with both of these
Mhm.
labels. Um, and so, like what people talk a lot about owning your masters, and the ill and the evils of a deal which is in perpetuity, and they're totally right. The reality is that more and more and more deals are not in perpetuity now. They're license deals. And so that might be a short time, like 3 years, 5 years. It might be 25, 30 years. And for all intents and purposes, the label basically owns the masters for the period of the license, right? What people kind of overlook with that is that if the label cannot earn back all the recoupables, so the costs that the project has incurred, then even a short license, a 3-year license, that'll go on forever until it's recouped. So it's kind of it's a bit of a trick there. So
Yeah.
these albums are all on licenses, and some of them are on horrifically long licenses with a label who has no intention of supporting the product, and then some are with a label who just don't have the tooling to to get them to earn more to recoup.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So
So let
in
me
short, I'm not naming names.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. So really quick, what kind of support are you looking for that they're not providing that you think communities could provide in crypto?
Right. So I think the point is here. It's not even so much the community in crypto. It's more myself. Like
Okay.
I can reimagine anything with this work. I can contextualize it however I want to, and these labels are not interested in that conversation.
Okay.
One of them was never interested in the conversation. Like even when it was new, I was like, well, what if we did this little thing and it would cost this much, it would recoup in this time, and like, no, we can't do that. It's like, well, why are we even in business? Because we signed
Yeah.
a contract? Okay, so this, like, yeah.
Got it. Hmm.
But it's interesting because in the independent music sector, licensing is the norm.
Right.
And the situation you find, like, say, a year after the new release, this is normal. Like
Uh-huh.
unless you're touring super hardcore, but then as soon as you stop touring hardcore, you better have a new record to drop. So it's just, it's like how it's a hamster wheel, right? Like a
Yeah.
Groundhog Day hamster wheel that it ends up really, it does inflict on people's relationships, mental health, and most independent artists are chasing their tails, like eating hand to mouth, month to month. And then you might have a great month, and then you might have a shit month, so
Sure.
that there's a reality to that, which I think Web3 possibilities, from one-of-one collectors through to edition supporters through to crowd funds, like to be able to create infrastructure which can then, take the foot off your neck a little bit and
Yeah.
allow you to get back to creating. Yeah.
Yeah. Mark, can you paint for me a roadmap, a plan for others that want to follow in your footstep, that want to take control of their catalogs, that want to tap into Web3, they want to buy back their art so they can own it and then co-own it alongside with fans and community members. How do you do that? How do you go by doing that? Because what we see on the surface, Mark, is the polished pitch, right?
Right.
In the money getting raised.
Right.
What the hell happened in the back end, back behind the scene, to get to the point where you wrote this blog post to basically issue the process of buying back your work? How can other people basically learn from you to apply that in their own context?
Man, the way it looks, as the way the idea is presented and the way it works with the token and what the token represents, that was like I think there were like 6 kind of versions of this whole thing. So the idea got workshopped and kind of brainstormed a lot. And I think that's important for any idea anyway. Like
Mm-hmm.
to have a little brain trust you can depend on, people you can go to who are happy to sit down with you, go through something, and offer their perspective. Because, like,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how on point we think we are, blind spots are human nature, right? But so rewinding before that, I had to approach these labels, and that wasn't the most,
Friendly.
friendly or
Yeah.
comfortable conversation to
Yeah.
have.
It's like,
But
what? You want to leave us? Like, what? Like,
this is unprecedented. We've never
yeah.
had this happen before. Um, so I was very, very polite, and I've tried through this whole campaign to not look like I'm label bashing, because some labels are
Dude,
good, and
here's
there's
the
a
thing.
functionality.
Exactly. Like, everybody has their own needs, their own
Yeah.
wants, their own requirements. Like,
Yes.
there is no bashing. Everybody has their own level of expertise, their own level of skills that they need
Hmm.
outsourcing and help with. They
Hmm.
need this type of, like, there is no cookie cutter like puzzle piece here. None of that shit exists, right?
100%.
And just like a side tangent, I think, like, throughout a lot of the content that I create, people may interpret it as me bashing on, like, the middleman. And rather, it's less about that. It's more so even the middlemen can partake in this and just adjust their models to this new era,
It's
right? To
gonna
this
be,
new way of thinking. It's like
yeah.
it's happening whether they like it or not, kind of thing.
Exactly. And that whole
Okay,
thing of, if middlemen are, if it's equitable, I'm cool. But for me, equitable means that the person who created the art or the art product should always be the majority earner, always.
yeah,
And it's things are the other way around. So it's like,
yeah.
that's where middlemen need to catch up for sure.
But anyways,
Um,
I digress. So first
totally,
step,
totally,
step
totally.
one, approach the label, approach your
Yeah,
partners. Hey guys,
yeah,
I want out. Step one.
yeah,
Step
yeah.
two,
This is why, this is what. How much would that? How much is this?
yeah,
Because you got to put a dollar figure on it.
right.
And
And
then
how do you figure out the dollar figure actually?
it's based on projected future earnings.
Okay, great.
So that's difficult with a perpetual deal. Like, to buy a record out of a perpetual deal, I wouldn't even know how to. That's like, you need a ninja level lawyer,
Hmm.
like, for sure. But with a license deal, you can project this, right? So you can look at, okay, so there's 20 years left on the license. It earns this much per year, so that's that times 20. Maybe they want to sweeten it up a little bit or whatever. So a
Hmm.
little back and forth. You land on a number. Um, I one of one of the labels pushed back on me actually soon after because I subtweeted something, and um, but like I know how to subtweet. Like unless if I subtweet about you, unless you're the person that did the thing, no one's gonna know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about,
Yeah.
right? So it's like the fact you picked up on this is hilarious, but they were kind of like, look, if you continue to tweet kind of like this, I was like, well, look at my Twitter feed. Most of what I talk about is about the music industry. Most of it's anecdotal, and most of it is like redacted.
Mhm.
So it is what it is. But it was interesting that there was that kind of immediate like they came back to me saying, well, we don't have to give you your records back. And so that could be interesting. It's like you make the raise, go back to the label, like, hey, can you invoice me for that bread, and I'll send it straight
Yeah.
over. And they're like, well, actually, we're not gonna do the deal.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting proposition there. And then that's when it goes legal.
Mhm.
And then it becomes a battle, which is the principle of all this. Honestly, is more important to me than my catalog. I want the catalog back, but the idea of proof of concept around some disruption and new model iteration, like that's so much more important to me. Because
Yeah.
other people are going to do this better than me,
Right.
like without doubt. And I'm so excited to see that happen.
Okay. So step 1, contact them. Step 2, if you need to get legality and lawyers involved. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Step 3, come to some terms of dollar amounts of what the value is worth. Step 4,
Get your shit back.
get your shit
you
back.
know,
So issue the crowd fund.
yeah, issue the crowd fund. And I mean, we don't even have kind of best practice strategies around crypto crowd funds at this point.
Sure.
So whatever with that. But yeah, get the crowd fund out, and then it's just a process of like it's transactional. You pay the amount, they take it off DSPs, you put it back up on DSPs if that's what you want to do. The
Hmm.
ISRC codes will retain all the data. So well, I mean, not literally, not like a smart contract, but for example, if something's had 10 million plays, it gets taken down. I put it back up as long as it's the same length file, same ISRC code that all gets
Oh
retained.
shit. So you lose all the streaming data around that too.
No, you retain it as long as you keep the ISRC code
Oh, okay, 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 okay,
and the
okay.
file length is the same.
Okay, okay, okay.
This is like the first time I've thought ISRC codes are actually useful because I've always been like, why do if I can't get my money instantly, what are they for?
Okay, solid,
Yeah.
solid. Okay. Okay, so what comes after that?
So yeah, after that is as far as the buyback, the governance level of the DAO, like that'll be a discussion too. Like what happens next? Like I've imagined, like what if I put the whole catalog on something built off Nina or something like this? What would
Mhm.
that look like having the whole catalog on the blockchain? That's one perspective. One perspective is like I was mentioning, like remixing, reimagining. But then really it's just about moving forward. Let's make new work. This is when I say the back catalog is the foundational asset of the DAO and the treasury. What that means to me most of all is there's something there which can create value as and when needed. And
Mhm.
that can't quite be measured in
Mhm.
advance. But my biggest motivation in anything is to create new art, new music, new
Right.
collaborations, contribute newness to the world. And so I don't. I'm not trying to get caught up on a loop of like my back catalog, my back catalog. But it's there to build off. So we're like all of us experimenting in plain sight. That really excites me. I don't know where that's going to lead, and you know, any roadmap with any more detail, I'd be lying because
Mhm.
all I can promise is that it probably won't be that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean,
You know,
there's. I was just going to say that there's projects in mind that are too alpha to share, but I just
right.
know this is going to facilitate some
Sure.
wild shit.
Yeah. So that sounds like that's like the last, like that's the end of everything. Like you got it. Now figure out what to do with it. Right. And figure out what to do with it alongside the people who helped you purchase it and build some
Exactly.
type of tangible community and figure out retention, figure out engagement, figure out how you
Hmm.
can keep people engaged, figure out how they can support you even more. What other things can you issue that they might be interested in doing? Because like talk about upselling, right? In a very traditional sense. Like if you're a collector, if I collected something, chances are I'll collect something from that person again if they continue to like wow me, quote unquote, which you shouldn't be doing things to wow other people. Like if you pursue your craft and you pursue your creativity, that should be enough to bring more people in, right? You shouldn't
One
be doing
hundred
things
percent.
for the collectors kind of thing. Like we look like I'm a very amateur collector, like very amateur, right? But I look for things that like wow me kind of thing. And if an artist continues to wow, like wow, like this is cool, like let's support. Anyways, I digress. Okay, cool. I think that's super helpful, Mark. And I think I hope a lot of people listen to this. And if they do decide to kind of pursue the same model that you're pursuing and the same plan of action, that they can learn from you and use you as a guide using this audio. So super helpful. You talk about like you pitch this concept already to some of the labels for an extent. Why don't we try this and experiment with this? And you're like, yeah, no, we can't do that. And you would think that everybody is Spotify's bitch. And you would think that this type of medium would actually be a cool experimentative medium to explore new ways to monetize, new ways to engage, new ways to be innovative, new ways to be first at something. But you see people hesitant with it. Why? Like the first thing that comes to mind as to why they're hesitant with it is because it's like it's just change. It's something new. It's different. They have their business model. They make money from it. Like this is what they're used to. Why the hell would you put money into something that you're very uncertain about? But if you look at some of the best companies in the world, they allocate money to R&D. They try to innovate. They try to spark things internally that might be, an avenue that might grow or put them out of business kind of thing. Right. And that's not to say that Web3 will put them out of business. Nobody knows that. What do
For
you
sure.
think?
For sure.
Everybody's
But
Spotify's bitch. I don't know. Like you would think like, I don't know. I'm talking out loud here.
no, it's all good. I mean, you're on point. I mean, I feel like labels don't have the profit margin for R&D, let alone artist development.
Yeah.
Artist development is very rare now. It used to be standard with labels. But I think there's just so much risk. It's like the same reason we don't see Drake in the space. It's like if it doesn't work, that's not a good look.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of insecurity around that. But more to the point, I think right now is that the mainstream media narrative around crypto and
Yeah. For
blockchain and
sure.
NFTs is horrific. And
Yeah.
it's
That
like
plays a role.
it totally. I mean,
Yeah.
I definitely had pushback. So on my mailing list, I did a mail out when buyback launched, and mostly people who replied were supportive. I did get one reply. It was like, I'm a longtime fan. I love what you do. But what do you say to people who followed your instructions and then lost 30% of their money yesterday?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the timing of buyback with the market, not
Yeah.
ideal.
Yeah.
But of course, we know that, well, this is the best time to come in.
Yeah.
But that whole education is so complicated. So for a label to risk that, I think there's a lot of risk there. So I can see the apprehension, but the mindset doesn't help. You're right. Like there's a fundamental mindset of this is how the industry works, so this is how we work. And by the way, the deal we offer you is a little better than their deal, therefore we're the good guys. It's like, no, you're still not the good guys.
We're starting to see appear these like DAOs dedicated to buying music catalogs.
Mm.
And in a very smart, intelligent way. And Universal Music Group is not going to spin up a DAO, at least not yet. Atlantic is not going to do it. Interscope is not going to do it. They're going to end up being LPs, investors in other DAOs that have the subject knowledge expertise, that want to spend time innovating, that want to spend time experimentating, which will be beyond their grasp and beyond their wheelhouse of like central focus. So I think at some point we're going to see more of these like record labels. They're going to like it's like a dumb move not to do it. It's a dumb move not to further explore what's happening. And I may be dumb thinking like they're not even doing it. They're probably already doing it, like for the most part,
I mean,
right?
I'm sure they have. I'm sure every major has their kind of whatever they call
They're,
it NFT department,
right,
but
right.
I highly doubt they're staffed by the right people.
Yeah,
That. But just speaking to what you're saying about like that they, hopefully they would adopt in some way. Like when MP3 happened, like I was in London. I was very much part of a vinyl community.
hmm
Like, for someone to press up a 12-inch of some underground club music and sell 10,000 copies was not unusual. and that was pretty good money too. And then at the bottom end of the scale, it's like you do a new 12-inch, and maybe Japan pre-orders 1,000 copies, and like now people struggle to sell 500 units of like a
Yeah.
super independent kind of release. So it was all about vinyl, sometimes CD, mostly vinyl. Then MP3 comes in, and vinyl, like we talk about the vinyl resurgence because it died, it got killed. So, early 2000s, vinyl got killed. And I saw distributors in London who were they were the distributor for whole ecosystems of labels. And I saw them go bankrupt, like left, right, and center, because they didn't believe MP3 was real music, or they didn't, if it's not on vinyl, it's not real, or like
Yeah.
this is not even going to take off. And, like from our perspective now, 20 years later, like MP3 underpins the entire music ecosystem.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's that whole thing of adapt or die, I think, is very real. And time will tell if Web3 is another of those kind of zeitgeist harbingers.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm rooting for you. I full transparency, I contributed I think zero point 0.1 ETH if I remember
Thank you,
correctly to the
man. I appreciate
crowdfund.
you.
Of course, dude. I know it's not a lot, but hopefully it's something.
It all helps. You know
And
that.
I'm excited. I'm excited for your journey. I'm excited for people to be watching you because you are the example of what's going on right now. Everybody's building in public, and I think, and I commend you actually for what you're doing. I think it's super cool. So Mark, before I let you go, really quick, any last words? Any final messages? Because your crowdfund is still going.
It is
So
still going. I
so
mean, yeah, I any support with the crowdfund is amazing, and that's everything from a retweet to a conversation about it. Like I know there are labels and artists seeing the crowdfund and having the conversation, and that's really excites me. So yeah, I appreciate all the support with that. We have a few days left, and super hyped to push it over the goal line and just be able to get that project rolling. And beyond that, yeah, I'm just I'm here for everyone in the space to win, and I'm seeing it happen. I'm seeing us all experiment in different ways, different models. But I really feel like if you're as a creator, whether it's music, visual art, whatever it might be, if that's your passion and there's integrity and diligence there, then I want you to win. And in this new world, we're all gonna make
yeah,
it, right? So
yeah.
it's like,
Swag
I
me.
mean, yeah, I believe it. So I'm just happy to be part of the the community, and looking forward to what comes next.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Mark. Final question.
Mm.
Because the crowdfund is still going, what happens if it doesn't get fulfilled?
That's a great question. So if it doesn't reach the goal, then I mean, there's different options. My first option is going to be to wait a little bit for the market to recover. And then I can reach the goal, because the
Okay.
goal, the labels will come fiat. So that's the goals are in fiat. Um, and then beyond that, if I've got to top it up myself, whatever has to be done. Like, this is happening no matter what. The governance level of Mashy Beats with the buyback token, that's happening no matter what. The next
Yeah.
projects are happening no matter what. Yeah.
Amazing, dude. I'm rooting for you. Mark, where can we find you? Where can we learn more about what you're doing before I let you go? Shill yourself. Give us the deets.
For sure. Thanks, man. I mean, Twitter is the easiest place. It's my initials, MDCL. Otherwise, what do you mean otherwise? That's where to find me. Find me on Twitter. The pinned tweet will always be whatever I really want to let you know about, and you'll know where it's at.
I love it, Mark. Good shit, man. Let's do this again soon. We should definitely do one once the crowdfund fulfills and you actually buy back the catalog
Yeah,
and all
man.
that's fulfilled, and we'll do a recap. And if it doesn't get fulfilled, we'll also do a recap and kind of learn about the process afterwards and what you're doing to kind of make it happen. So
One
rooting for you,
hundred
man.
percent,
Let's
man.
go.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you, man.
Of course.